It is on. Thank you very much. 121, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Cool down a little bit.
I put a little milk in it, but how you been doing?
Okay.
I was
Oh,
all
you thought
excited
better?
and proud of myself to have
Not
everything
really.
ready on time, and then I forgot my own book.
Yeah, I can't seem to get rid of it.
I thought you was coming, okay.
She even gave me pills and the pills aren't even working.
She gives to us last week.
I will get them all copied out. I have to cut some more paper from my printer, but I will get everything.
We don't really need anything.
Yeah, on Sunday, I'll make sure we have next week's. We are on chapter 10.
No, 8.
That's 9, Kimmy. That's session 9. We are on 9.
Oh, no, we are on 9. Sorry, number 10 is what I was looking to copy, and then I realized I needed more paper.
Oh.
So we are on 9, the faith of a foreign woman.
Yeah. You feel better?
I don't have any in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep trying to help you out.
Yeah, next time you eat before you come.
Maybe that'll help you. You didn't eat before you came. That's not helping you feel better.
Yes,
So if you don't want
How do you get?
Hear that we can give her?
I'm suddenly forgetting how to get it.
This is your story. This is my story. But most of all, this is the greatest story ever told. This is God's story.
Is it that? No. That's the one. Oh, that's a good story. Can you see it?
It's back there.
Yeah, I know.
In the days when judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem from Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. The names of their 2 sons was Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. They went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, and one was named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. When Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home," but Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I'll be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her.
In the lower story, all hope is lost for Naomi. She moved from Bethlehem to Moab with her husband to weather the storm of famine raging in the land around them at the same time as Gideon's story from the last chapter. Not long after they arrive, her husband dies, but she still has her 2 sons to care for her. While they are in Moab, they both marry Moabite women, and 10 years later, tragically, both of her sons die. In complete emptiness, Naomi decides it's time to go back home to Bethlehem. Her daughter-in-laws decide that they want to go, She begs them not to come, that they will have a better life if they stay in Moab. She finishes her speech with these painful words. No, my daughters, it's more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. In the lower story, we see that she had lost all hope, and she felt it was all the result of the Lord's doing in the other story. Naomi was able to convince the one daughter-in-law to stay, but the other, Ruth, insisted that she go. Here's how she put her decision. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. She has certainly chose the road less traveled. Life will be extremely hard for Naomi and Ruth. They will likely live in poverty the rest of their life. And to make matters worse, Ruth is a Moabite. The Moabites had oppressed the Israelites for 18 years before he got the judge to deliver them. In the lower story, there was little chance that she would be accepted. Yet out of deep love for her mother-in-law and her well-being, this is the path that she chose. When Naomi and Ruth's sandals crossed into Bethlehem's borders, after being gone for over a decade, the women of the town exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Naomi replied, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." The word Mara in Hebrew obviously means bitter. She is really convinced that God has orchestrated all of this, and he has, but she just doesn't know how the story will end. Now, Naomi owns land that her husband and sons used to farm. However, Naomi can't manage this property by herself, so she'll be forced to sell her land to pay the bills. And once she does, this will basically be committing her life to servitude. But the bigger, bitter pill to swallow is that the identity of the family is tied to land ownership. If her husband's land is lost, it'll be as though he never existed. So how will two poor single ladies make it in Bethlehem? Well, the Old Testament made a provision for the poor called gleaning. Those who owned land would send the harvesters into the field to gather the crop. Whatever little was left, they were to leave for the poor to glean. This is Ruth's primary way to help and to show love to her aging mother-in-law. She will do the gleaning and hopefully bring home enough for both of them to live on. She randomly picks a field to glean, and the owner shows her favor. Ruth is shocked that she is accepted as an outsider and even given protection. Here's what she asks the owner. "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" He replies, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. How you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth runs home with her arms filled with food and excitement and shares the story with Naomi over a Thanksgiving meal. Naomi inquires about the identity of the owner, and Ruth tells her that his name is Boaz. Naomi almost has a heart attack. Why? Because Boaz is a close relative. Why is she so excited about that? You see, there is a concept taught in the law, in Deuteronomy 25 to be exact, that states that if a man dies without an heir, the next of kin has the option to marry his widow, love her, take care of her, pay off the financial debts, and redeem the land. This man is called the kinsman redeemer. When they have a child, he is to deed the land to that heir in the name of the deceased husband, thus allowing his name to live on. Essentially, the kinsman redeemer takes on a huge risk and in the end doesn't increase his net worth a single penny. Naomi hasn't been this hopeful in a long time. She takes on the role of a Jewish matchmaker like the one you see in Fiddler on the Roof. She tells Ruth to take a shower, splash on some Chanel 5, and put on her Sabbath best. She was then to head over to Boaz's house that night, playing the part of Cinderella. She needed to wait until he finished eating. Never approach a man with an empty stomach. After he went to bed, she was to sneak in and uncover his feet and lie down at the foot of his bed. Boaz would understand exactly what Ruth was doing. It was a nonverbal way of requesting marriage. Ruth does everything Naomi asks of her. And Boaz wakes up startled and asks who she is. She replies, I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. Now the word for garment in Hebrew is the same word for wing. When Ruth first met Boaz, he referred to God's wing providing a refuge. Ruth was now asking Boaz to be God's wing to her, and he accepted. He exercised his obligation, and they were married. He not only bought Ruth's widow's land, but all his brother's land and their father's as well. Risking his own estate, did add to his personal treasury by one item and redeemed them all. What drives a Boaz to turn his attention from his own selfish needs and wants to reach out to an outsider? Well, as it turns out, Boaz, the now strong, wealthy, respected man in Bethlehem, knew what it was like to be an outsider. We learn in another part of the story of the Bible that Boaz's mother is Rahab, the harlot. Rahab was the Canaanite prostitute that provided coverage for Joshua's spies when they were scoping out the land. She risked her life and as a result was adopted into the family of Israel. Boaz knew what it felt like to be an outsider at one time and had it in his heart to reach out to someone else in that same position. As it turns out, that person was Ruth. Ruth and Boaz had a little boy together. That little lad didn't know it yet, but he will inherit the land of his father, Mahlon, whom he never met. He will carry on that family name because of the kind act of Boaz. The women of the town said to Naomi, Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. In the lower story, Naomi thought her life was over, that God had given up on her. Well, she was mistaken. Naomi took her grandson and cuddled him in her lap. The women of the town spread the gossip. Naomi has a son. What happened to the name Mara? Bitter. I guess it didn't stick. She went back to being called Naomi, which in Hebrew means beautiful. And beautiful her life became. She now had a son to work the land, which meant that the name of her husband, Elimelech, would live on. The little heir's name was Obed, which simply means worker. Sounds like a boring name until you understand the whole story. As overwhelming a turnaround as this is, the good news doesn't stop here. There's more going on in the other story. At the end of the book of Ruth, we are given the genealogy of Boaz's family. It is here that Obed grows up and has a son named Jesse. Jesse then grows up and has a son named David. And 28 generations later, a little baby is born in a manger in the town of Bethlehem named Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate kinsman redeemer, and he came from the family of an outsider named Ruth. God was not only working above the scene of Ruth's life to provide her earthly needs in the lower story, he was working out his upper story plan with her in mind. He went out of his way to include an outsider, a pagan Moabite in the lineage of Jesus. Now that is extreme acceptance. In the lower story, their life seemed hopeless, with no chance of acceptance. In the upper story, God redeems their lives and accepts them as his own. You know, right now, your story might seem a little hopeless and bitter to the taste. But remember, if you love God and align your life to his purposes, as we learn in Romans 8:28, God is working it all out for the good. So wait patiently for God. Wait patiently for God to unfold his good plan for you.
So real quick before you jump in, Pat, two things. Pat. I hope you notice that the book of Ruth is the Bible's home. Women go out, they lose their men, lose their family, they go back to their hometown, they find the man that'll come in and take care of them. It's just like a Hallmark movie. So, but second, just on a historical note, bridging that gap, the gleaning portion that he talked about in there about going in and taking the crops. Do you know what current day program that we have in our society that is very similar to that sentiment? So our program, so we have a government program where we help those that are not able to fully help themselves by using and subsidizing from the crops.
Not for long, we're not gonna.
Well, how it was established, let me say. How it was established. The crops that were over to help subsidize those that needed assistance, couldn't get it there. It's the food stamp program. The food stamp program was based out of that same thought process where originally it was the food stamp program came through the farmers where excessive crops were put aside and then the government would reimburse the farmer and the person who was able to get them through agriculture. And so that program in and of itself has direct biblical connections in its thought and concept because that is a biblical construct. We are instructed, we know that in the Salvation Army, we are instructed to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. That is not a negotiable. That is what we are called to do as Christians. And so that program, now we know humans got in and screwed everything up. But I think that's very cool to see that in its basis, that's not something that's out of the realm where we live. But most importantly, Hallmark movie. I'm going to get Pat yeah, that's right, Major. Oh, see? She's got a title and everything. And then when you're done when you watch the Hallmark movie, you then move on to Song of Solomon for the nighttime version. All right, go ahead.
That's a Hallmark movie.
See, this is why it's a good thing you weren't here last week. We were talking about women last week as well.
Oh, I like talking about women.
You're awful.
Well, if you had been
We only
here,
got here.
if you had been here, I said, who could have helped me recreate my Old Testament project? My Old Testament project where I killed you.
Oh, yeah.
With a tent peg.
There's a
So,
lot.
so last week, we got to hear about Deborah and Jael, who were, examples of doing what God had said. And then Delilah, who, oh, help me, who wasn't really doing what she was supposed to be doing. So we move on, and we're talking about more women this week. And he stole it. It really is like the Cinderella story type thing, if you're listening to it. But there was a little piece that he added there in the end that I knew in the back of my mind, but I forget when I'm actually reading the book of Ruth. And that's who Boaz's mother was. If you go into the first chapter of Matthew, it's the genealogy of Jesus and from, Abraham on down, and you're looking, and there are a few women listed. One, Tamar, the mother of Perez. Well, the father was Judah, and that was a case of the girls were afraid that their things wouldn't happen, so they tricked dad. We'll just leave it at that. Another one that we get down to,
There's a lot of names.
there is, but then we hear about Solomon and his mother. David being his father, and his mother had been somebody else's wife, had been Uriah's wife. So that came out, did not start the original way. And then you hear Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. And we know that was just when Jericho was taken over. So that helps you kind of put in perspective kind of the time frame. This isn't too far off of when they finally got into the promised land. So, and that was 40 years after getting out of Egypt. So it helps you kind of put the pieces together, the timeline a little bit.
But you even got to connect it there. And don't get it twisted. Put it right. Jesus' genealogy has an outsider and a hooker. Like, sometimes we have to put those words in our brain to really accept what they are. Like, you look back to his past, and God was very specific on just like the disciples were flawed people, the people in Jesus' genealogy, he was very specific on who was in there. But then you go and you look at this, and so the son of a hooker is not just the one who becomes the kinsman redeemer, he's the grandfather to King David. Like, that's that. And suddenly when we put those names in our brain, we get the connection. And it goes back to the opposite of what the people thought as we're going into Lent, why there was so much upheaval about people saying Jesus was not the Messiah, because they had in their mind perfection across the board, that he's going to come from the cleanest of lines, and that all that. And reality was...
Well, even at that, you go back and you have Jacob in there.
Yeah.
And he was the one who tricked his dad, stole his brother's stuff, which then ended up causing issues.
So you take one person out of that equation, and you mess up that line into Jesus, and it's all flawed people.
You know, you can look and you can see that there's an awful lot of names. And some of the names is like names that it's like, okay, I understand, and there's a lot there. But it's the way it's, you know, we see this part right here and talking about like God seeing it up here. So, you know, at the very beginning of the story, you have of the story of Ruth and Naomi, you have Naomi and her husband and her sons. There's another famine. There seem to be a lot of famines, especially when people aren't listening to what God's saying and they're going off to other countries. We saw that's how they ended up in Egypt to begin with, was a famine. And so they go. And
the region they're in, by the way, is now Palestine. That's the region they're at right now. So there would be constant movement between there and Egypt because of the proximity. And famines were very frequent.
So you have them going, and it's not just somewhere else, they're going into Moab, who had already like attacked the Israelites. But that's where the food is. So they go there, and I don't know if they had plans like when they were going to go back or what was going to happen. But at that point, the boys got older, boys got married, and then dad dies. And then still another 10 years, and then both sons die. I don't know how to process that. How do you process? I've moved to a foreign country to make things better for my family, and now I've lost everybody that I came here with.
It's almost like she's a female Job. Like, you know, Job lost his family, his land, his connections, his status. And, you know, we know that there's some sort of faithfulness already in Naomi. But something happens, she loses everything in very much the same way that Job does.
But still, she's ready to just wait for whatever is next. And then finally the word comes that it's safe to go home. There's food at home.
And it's important to say too, when her husband would have died, all you grandparents, it's now the children's responsibility to take care of Naomi. Like, she's fully 100% reliant on the sons. They're there to take over completely of harvesting, of farming, of running everything. Because back then, in those days, everybody was like Dee, and they all lived in the same household. The whole family lived together in one. And yeah. And so they would, you know, that they would take over that responsibility. And so she was fully dependent. So she went from being dependent on her husband to then dependent on both her sons. And we don't know the time frame of how long it was between sons dying, to now being completely dependent on herself, which in and of itself was a mark in culture that something was wrong, that God took away the men in your life, ladies. You know, in culture, you guys can't handle it. Apparently, is what they thought. Boy, were they wrong. Oh my
Whoops,
gosh!
you just got it.
If they saw this core right now,
She didn't get another one either.
yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, she made sure baby girl got one
Yeah,
though.
but she didn't.
Yeah, she didn't get another
one and
man.
done.
No, she didn't go to try. She didn't go to lay ask him to put his wing over her. But that's so now she's lost all of that too. And it's interesting now because then the daughters, now you actually have, it's like a weird Golden Girls scenario with a mother and daughter-in-laws, and they're all dependent on each other when in actuality they're not even supposed to be dependent on each other. They are almost outcasts wherever they go.
And they were both ready. They were both ready to go with it. But she's like, you know, really? You're still young enough. You can still find somebody. This is
You can get 'em.
where you can get him in. This is where your people are. Jennifer was just walking by, so. This is where your people are. You know, you can stay here and be with your people. You don't have to go back where it's already going to be hard enough going back as it is. Now nobody's going to know you. And one decided to, you know, I love you, but okay, I'll stay here. You want me to find somebody here, I'll stay here. And Ruth said, nope, not going to do it. I am going to go with you. Where you go, I will go. Who you serve, I will serve. Your God will be my God. And is ready, whatever that relationship was, whatever happened, that relationship was at a point where it was, I will give up everything I know. She had to have seen something of God in Naomi
She wasn't blood.
to say,
She was the daughter-in-law.
well, and that's what I'm saying, is that she had no reason, like, okay,
She must have known about God from the religion that Naomi taught her.
well, and so
She
that's
must have
the
some
thing. So
faith.
it wasn't whatever, but it wasn't the faith of her people that went, you know, growing up, like, this is what I'm surrounded in. You know, just like if you don't grow up in the church and you marry someone who goes in the church and then you start going in and it's all foreign to you.
I think what Darlene's saying is that it's pretty obvious that Naomi
Well,
led her to the Lord.
yeah,
And
so-
she leaned into that
well, that's-
teaching.
And that's it. So there was, Naomi was doing, I mean, now we don't know what Elimelech and the two boys, you know, what they were sharing about God, but she had, you know, had to have had Naomi there really saying, you know, this is who we believe in. This is what has happened. This is what our God has done and what our God has brought us through. For her to say, forget everything that I've been raised to know. I love you and I'm going to follow you. What a faith to have. You know, that, all right, Mom, I don't know what you got. I don't know what's going to happen, where we're going, but I'm going with you. And then they go. And now Naomi does have a little bit of, now she has her little woe is me moment, and I'm changing my name.
It's not a little. She throws a temper tantrum.
Yes, she has her breakdown temper tantrum,
Yeah.
which
She lost her husband and her
is
kids.
okay. She lost her husband. She lost her sons. She lost, now her daughter-in-law, you know, one daughter-in-law is going back. She's allowed to have that moment. My life is miserable. I'm changing my name. It means bitter, miserable. This is my new personality.
But what's interesting too with it too is she goes back to Jerusalem, so Bethlehem, sorry, and she goes back, and she's recognized, and she has this woe is me, justifiable woe is me moment, but she makes it a point to bring others into it, and that's like a sign of depression and everything else that you're dealing with when you're like, that's, they talk about it being a cry for help almost. Like you bring other people into your depression. No, I'm okay. I do it all the time. I do it all the time. Never mind. And for her, it's don't even call me Naomi, because Naomi would have been equated to a child of. That's your name always is equated to a child of. And so her name would have been equated to her past, which is where her friends would have known her from. And she felt so far from that because her husband died, her sons had died. But it's not just that they died. The Lord has taken them from me. And so I hear
and it was
all the
that
time,
her
blame
name
God.
meant beautiful. Naomi
Yeah,
meant beautiful.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it
and
went
she
from
no
my
longer
life
felt
is
it.
beautiful things. I'm not hating under that. God has taken all that away from me, and now I am a bitter, grumpy person.
Literally, the name Mara is bitter. Yeah, call me. I went from beautiful to bitter. Remember Bitter Beer Face, the commercial? Yeah, like, yeah. No? You don't remember that commercial? Oh, they got Bitter Beer Face. They sip the beer and they like turn into the old man with his teeth sucked in. That's what I'm picturing. Like, yeah.
I know.
Oh, I didn't drink it either. It was on TV. It was in the 90s. It was in the 90s. Don't say before your time. Anybody in here?
Before my time.
No, I don't think so. You were all not only alive, you were thriving. Still thriving, but, That's true.
Yeah, that didn't work.
Mine was my babysitter.
So now they've come back, and you're right. It doesn't say how long it was from when they left to when her husband died. We don't know how long what that was. But then it does say that it was 10 years from when he died to when both sons were dead. So we know that I'm going to say it's probably at least 11 years, because I don't think they just got there and then the next day he died. It was a little bit of time. So people still recognize her, and people still remember her. She's coming back to the neighborhood, and everybody's happy to see her, but she's grumpy. But she still tells Ruth, this is how we're going to be able to survive. And so Ruth just goes out, and she goes to the field. And, some people would read this and say, oh, well, that's just coincidence that she ended up at Boaz's. Well, we know it's not a coincidence. God led her there, even though she may not have even realized it. And that's where she's gleaning.
It doesn't say that she went to anybody else. I think if it was important, I think it would have pointed out that she tried other houses. Essentially, what she's doing, Ruth, in this gleaning, what you would do is you were a door-to-door salesman. You would go to these stores and you would knock on them and say, I am in need of food. Can I work for you? And in return, whatever is left over, I take home to my family. That's what gleaning is. You would literally go begging from door to door for the opportunity, the will work for food sign. That's what you were doing. And it doesn't say that she went off and went to all these houses. It just says she went and she sees Boaz. And you had to be obviously accepted. Say, yes, you can harvest my field, yes. You were allowed permission. The law stated you were permission to ask, but you could be denied. And guess what most people did with their farmland? They denied because they wanted to keep all of the
Well, and here's the thing
farms.
is that it wasn't even him who said.
Right.
Because it says, she got in with whoever the foreman was,
Yeah.
the overseer.
Elimelech.
She's there, and he just happens to come visit the field that day.
Yep.
And it's like, huh? Who's she?
Who's the hottie?
Well, it says, who does that young woman belong to? Well,
That's right. You heard that? Belong to women. I'm gonna get beat up on that. All right. I'll shut my mouth now.
it's all right. I have a Nerf gun and I know where you sleep.
Oh.
So it says, That's basically what he says. Is like, you know, I would imagine that there are probably other people out there gleaning after the harvesters. And he's like, ooh, she. I haven't seen her around before.
That's why you could hear the music, couldn't you?
And they said,
Yes,
They
they
said-
do. They played in Hallmark after dark.
They said, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So she came, and it wasn't I'm going to pick up a little bit and then just kind of scatter. She was there all day, working. So that's when Boaz goes to her and says, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in any other field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. And she said, well, why have I found such favor? I'm a foreigner. Why do you care? Like, why are you being so nice to me? It's kind of like if you have been living in New England, you live up in some places up in New England, and while you talk to your neighbor who lives a mile away down the way, and some places, and they're like, why are you talking to me? You got, our first appointment was in Massachusetts. So you're in Massachusetts, and people don't really just talk to say hello to each other. People just mind their own business. And then we had to go down to Kentucky for continuing education. And we're in this was it at the IGA the first time? We're at this teeny weeny little town that there's a college in the town, and that's about it.
Store half the size of Warriors.
Yes, teeny little store, and people are saying hello to us and how are you doing, and we're like,
Do you know them? Do they know you?
We're like,
we don't know them. I don't know
what
them.
is going on? So it's a little bit like that, where she's coming in from New York, going into Bible Belt country, and people are talking people are being nice, why are you, what, whoa. And that can be some culture shock right there.
The Moabites were not known to be the most pleasant people.
Well, and
That's what she grew up in.
and they had even taken over.
Correct.
They just realized, so you got that, wait a minute, you're not supposed to like me. You're not supposed to be nice to me. I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk to you. Why are you being so nice? And he said, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge.
This reminded me of people are always watching what we do, even when we don't think about it. Because he says, I heard about you. I did my homework. I looked into why you were out here. He saw her in the field all day, and he probably asked around, and he got her story. And people are watching us when we're not watching.
May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants. At mealtime, he called her over, come have lunch with me. She was able to eat all she wanted, and he even told the men, let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some socks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, so don't rebuke her.
He had a crush on her as much as she had a crush on him.
It was.
He was setting the table as much as she was setting the table.
It may even be more at first, because she's like, whoa.
They don't talk about how
Okay.
much he was flirting with her.
Well, I think right there it shows how much he was flirting.
Yeah.
Let's,
No.
you need to come sit down. Wait, And that's where the Hallmark movie comes in. You can see it where he's, come sit by me. I've got the good roasted grain and the good oil to dip it in. And oh, do you need some water? Here's some water. And hey guys, leave some extra for her.
You guys now that I've said about the Hallmark movie, that's all anybody's imagining. They're playing the story out as if it was just that.
So it says that she's there all day, and she gathers all this, and she takes it home. And her mother-in-law, and Naomi sees how much she brought, and was like, "Whoa, how did you manage to get that much?" I'm like, "That's not what I was expecting." And then she says, "And oh well, whose field were you in?" And find out it's a relative of her husband's. That is where it starts, now that's where Miss Mara, Miss Bitter's mind, her wheels start turning.
Which is important because to cross that bridge, if it had just been another, I don't think he did a good enough job of putting this perspective. In Naomi's mind, all of this is about keeping, and we know this in this town especially and in our families, it's about keeping the legacy of her husband and her husband's family alive. That's what Naomi's thinking this entire time. And yeah, he wants to well, and it's funny, I'm not an only child, but I have my mom's maiden name, and my mom was an only child, and then both her grandparents were only children. So I got my mom's maiden name because if I'd have got my dad's name, my family line would have died. And then I had all this joking pressure that I had to have a boy, because if I had a girl and she got married and changed her name, the line would die. So it'd be all over again. So Jake now has the pressure I had to keep the line going. And so, because Lord knows we don't want the buzzard name to die off. You know? Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. All us animals, but there's this.
Sorry about it.
But that's
The
what.
good news is that buzzards don't eat fish unless they're dead.
That's right. That's right. And so that's what Naomi's looking at. And if there would have been any other man that felt, if Boaz had not been related to the husband, yeah, Elimelech, thank you. Then Ruth could have got with him, like that. They could have made that happen, but it would have been starting all over, like this whole new line. There would have been some pushback as far as the whole Romeo and Juliet, Moabite, Jew kind of thing. But what would have happened to Naomi is that her husband's line would have been gone, and the family lineage would have been gone, and the land would have been gone most of all. And so that is what you were known for, was the land. That's why every time you died in biblical times, when they buried you, you were Joseph of Bethlehem, Joseph of Arimathea, David, all that you were tied to whatever area you were from, because everything was tied into the tribes of Judah and and everything else. So that was super important. So Naomi is looking for. That's why she's so excited. It's not that there's a little bit of
that, but there's also
good selfishness.
But also in that, you have somebody who just said, "I'm changing my name. The Lord has taken everything away from me." And now all of a sudden,
she gets to be the mother-in-law. She gets to be the mother hookup artist.
Now
She gets to be the holy lady bringing people together. That's
but what's
what she gets
the
to do.
first thing that comes out of her mouth? The Lord bless us. Now God is still providing for us. You forgot that 2 weeks ago. Come on. Remember, I'm going to remind you that you just said that. So, as she said, it would be good for you to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field, you might be harmed. So she said, just stay here. Stay with him. Keep working with him. He is a close relative. He is somebody who can redeem our family. And then one day, she gets to I am getting older. I won't be here forever. I need to make sure that you have somebody who's going to take care of you. Go get cleaned up, wash up, put on your best clothes, put some perfume on, get yourself all dolled up. And you're gonna go down, and when Boaz, he's gonna be at the threshing floor. When he falls asleep, uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do. And she said, okay. So he does this. She does this. He goes. He's asleep. All of a sudden wakes up. Probably because I'm imagining because his feet are cold. Because it said like uncover his feet. And you know, like your feet like control your temperature at night. So like I think it's his feet got cold and he was like, oh, hey, there's a lady at my feet. Who are you? And she says, I'm your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer of our family, which is something new for her to understand. But he knows what that means. Says, the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than what you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I'm a kinsman and redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I am. Stay here for the night. In the morning, if he wants to do his duty, good, let him redeem you. But if not, he is not willing. As surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here till morning. When he tells you when to sneak out, he's like, okay. So this is said like the unwritten kind of sort of like woman proposing to a man. Like, you hear me? Sleep at your feet. Which
Does that mean my dog has proposed to me?
oh gosh.
Because he sleeps up. I'm just asking. I'm just saying he sleeps at my
He
feet all
also
the time.
sleeps at your head too, so
Last night I did. Yeah, right over his head. I'm telling you. Yeah.
so that's so he's got this like he's like, okay. But you notice, I mean, he could have said no, like, no thanks. But he even pointed out, well, there's somebody else who's closer. But if, you know, I have to ask him, like the law says I have to ask him. But if he says no, I got you. So he ends up going, you know, and so
How messed up is it, by the way, that you really like somebody and you get like handed down?
oh, hang on, wait, there's more. Wait, you gotta wait till the one part that they didn't mention, which is crazy. I mean, what, like there isn't enough crazy stuff in this story. So she goes, and Naomi's like, are we happy? Yeah. She's like, well, I gotta, you know, I gotta wait. But he didn't send me home empty-handed, you know. He said, hold out your skirt, you know, hold out your thing, and like,
Wait.
hold out your skirt, okay, hold out your shawl. So like,
Okay, there we go.
she's coming home like, oh, he's still saying, listen, you have to leave right now because we don't want anybody to wake up and see you here. But don't go empty-handed here. And is giving her more stuff. He's still helping her. So now,
How awkward is that going to be? Like, I can't say yes, I'll marry you and change your life forever. Here's some barley. All right.
well, that'd be like you know, if it's so the story, the movie's on a ranch. Like, I can't give you an answer yet, but here's some steak.
Right.
That's bribery.
Yeah.
You know,
But it's steak. So
I would be home like eating that steak like. It's really good steak. I hope I get to have more of it. So Boaz goes out to the town gate and he's just waiting just as the other relatives who's a little bit closely related comes by. And he's like, come here, sit down, let's have a chat. And then he brought some of the other elders over and like, hey guys, come sit. And if I'm like the other person, I'm like, wait a minute, why are you gonna bring, if you just wanna like talk to me for a second, why are you gonna bring all these other people in? And all these other people are there. And he says, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to a relative, Elimelech. I thought I should bring them in. Ish. It's an omission. of all the fact. Hang on.
It's telling what,
Well,
this is
and-
what potentially could happen.
and so, well, I mean, the truth is that
If she can't find a suitor,
if she
she's broke.
can't find somebody, like, she's gonna have to sell this land. And, you know, he's the closest relative. Thought you should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of all of these people sitting here, the presence of the elders of my people, and if you will redeem it, do so. But if not, tell me so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and then I'm next in line. Like, I got dibs if you don't want this land. And the guy's like, that sounds great. I'll do it. I'll get some land. And he goes, oh, by the way, on the day that you buy the land, you also get Ruth the Moabite, the widow. And so then that means that you have to marry the widow and then, like, take on the family's name and stuff in order to maintain the name of the dead man with his property.
You just
I'm
described
like,
it like the worst episode of The Price is Right ever.
listen, but that's the thing is, like,
Exactly.
like, here it is. You get this. Oh, but by the way, you have to get married too. And you have to give up your name. But you can have this land, but you gotta take the lady too.
Also truly does show how much value was looked into land over people at that time frame in that culture.
So
Yeah.
this guy
Changed
says,
everything.
no, that I can't redeem it because that might endanger my own estate. You go ahead and do it. I'm not putting at risk my stuff.
Which is part of the thing you have to mention, that if you're a kinsman redeemer and you take on somebody else's line, you're giving up your own. You're giving up, so you're dropping your own lineage for the sacrifice of someone else's.
And so, not only he says that, now this
Isn't
is
that what women do anyways, by the way, when they get married and take on a man's name? They're taking on the lineage of their husband.
now. Here's the part that, like, got skipped over, which is it just boggles my mind. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other one. I will take the Elimelech's land and the girl gave his shoe away.
Never been more moved in my life.
So she was kind of bought with his shoe.
That is Cinderella.
There was, it was a sandal.
That's Cinderella, of course, telling
Well,
you.
there we go.
Where's the pumpkin at?
Yeah, for real.
I never been to Bob's
And so last week we were talking about Fabio, now we're buying people with shoes.
Right. The Bible can be fun if you rip it into it. It's some good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Bring it
So
forward.
then he announced, today you are witnesses, I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I've also required Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses to this. And they said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah,
Can
who
we just,
together built up the family of
So
Israel.
you guys must have had a brother to be able to carry on
yeah.
there, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, would you have done it?
Well, that's a great question. And can we just say
two other wives? Who's Rachel and Leah?
So that was Jacob's.
Yeah.
That was Jacob's wives.
And and
Darlene just doesn't care, she doesn't.
She's not.
well, and acquired. I will say, by the way, acquired Ruth is not like he got her in a trade from the Bengals, like the Phillies sent it where she acquired. Acquired in that connotation is I brought into my family. It's not a necessarily a ownership deal.
So-
Like during kettle season, we acquire Kimmy, and we now own her during that time frame.
Yes, you do.
So it does, you know,
I'm proud of it.
and
Yeah,
Anna
yes,
and Addie.
What am I, top liver?
Yes, you are.
So it does say,
I'm the senior sorority.
so, you know, It says that, well, that's the part he was really excited about marrying her for. And the Lord allowed her to conceive, gave birth to a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth."
I have not heard one thing in the Bible more than
John will wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
I got a text message from the Lord and he said, "Hold your horses." Okay. I've not heard something more homely, by the way, than all the women in the area rallied around Naomi and said, "Look what God has done for your family." That is such like a cool, like woman thing that it just reminds me of all, well, not this board because everybody here around the table hates each other, but in other places, they're so supportive for, I'm just messing. It really is but it's like this women together, and it's one of the few times in scripture, actually, that you see women coming together in such a girl power way, where they're raising up each other. You don't see that throughout the rest of the scriptures.
And then saying, "Your daughter-in-law is so much better than any son you could ever have."
For real.
I'm just saying. So that's where we end, and we get to see, we're reminded, we had the reminder of who Boaz's mother was, a foreigner who was redeemed and in the lineage of Christ. And now he's brought in another foreigner who's been redeemed. And next week, we get to start talking about, start off with talking about another woman, Hannah, and her journey. So let's pray. Father God, we just thank you for bringing us together where we can get more into your word and be reading the story, but more importantly, getting the story and getting what was going on. And God, while we may not see you specifically named and mentioned, people praying to you and coming to you in the story of Ruth, God, we see how it shows us what you're like, what Jesus did for us. Jesus is our kinsman and redeemer. And God, we thank you for that, and help us to have that same faith that Ruth did to step out and to follow you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
So all you ladies now need to go home and renew your vows by curling